some general DPWI updates from SONA, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions once the briefing is done. And I know there's quite a few, I think more than 20 members of the media on the virtual platform. So welcome to all of those members of the media as well, and I will now hand over to Minister de Lille.
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for taking the time. We will be emailing you the link to speak. There's a lot of detail in there, but it's necessary. So some of the progress, I will just give some updates, and then you will get the detail from the written version. So we're very pleased to update the media today, especially on the SONA pronouncements of the President. I'm joined by Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa. The two of us have been working together since 2019. And I think what made our task so interesting and enjoyable was that we were tasked to start an infrastructure department that has never existed before in our new democracy. And at the same time, the President gave us another task to draw up an infrastructure investment plan. And after that, he said to us, now you have to go and look for the funding for the infrastructure investment plan. So we started way back in May of 2020 when Cabinet adopted the infrastructure investment plan. So I will be giving you those updates today. But just some background information, the infrastructure investment plan forms a central part of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. And what we've done with the infrastructure investment plan, after we've identified the projects from all three spheres of government, all government departments, and state-owned entities, we followed the Infrastructure Development Act of 2014, and we gazetted all of those 62 projects as strategic infrastructure projects. And that is the investment plan. They've all been gazetted, and having gazetted those infrastructure projects, they then qualified for a shorter procurement process, but also for a monitoring role and an evaluation role which is played by Infrastructure South Africa. So not only does Infrastructure South Africa play a coordinating role of all of these projects, but they're also tasked to go and find some funding. As we know, our fiscus is not in a good space. So these are the projects that we are reporting on today. Government departments in general, and all three spheres of government and state-owned entities, they do their normal infrastructure delivery projects, where we also play a role in assisting them, especially that we have designed a new methodology to assess all infrastructure projects. And having assessed about 276 projects, only 55 of them qualified for to be bankable. Another new instrument that we are using now, before we start any infrastructure project, we do what is called project preparation. The project preparation helps us to de-risk the project so that you avoid overruns, overtime, over budget. And National Treasury then gave us 440 million to do the project preparation. That, of course, was not enough money. We then turned to the private sector at the end of November, beginning of November in 2020, and we packaged the projects that were bankable and asked them to assist us with project preparation funding. So there are major differences the way we approach infrastructure now. Then also, the President always said that infrastructure is the flywheel of the economy. And as part of the infrastructure, the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, the infrastructure is on top of the list within the recovery plan. So we are working well together with all government departments, state-owned entities, all three spheres of government, to begin to direct infrastructure so that we know at any point in time what infrastructure is being built and where. So ISA has become a single entry point for all infrastructure in our country, so that we know what different spheres of government is doing. Then, as you all know, concerning the infrastructure fund, the infrastructure fund was announced by the President at an investment conference in 2018. We were also tasked to make the fund operational, and finally in August of 2020, the Development Bank, who is just hosting the fund in a ring fence in the Development Bank of SONA, we signed an agreement with them. The Development Bank assisted us to capacitate the infrastructure fund with qualified, skilled people to help us to drive infrastructure in investment. A commitment from government was that government will put in 100 billion rand over the next 10 years in the infrastructure fund. So the way we work, we receive requests from all spheres of government, state-owned entities, the private sector, for funding. We will then evaluate the projects, and then we make a contribution towards the total value of the projects. Because this is a blended fund, we then go to the private sector to raise the other billions from the private sector. And we have been very successful in that. Over the next 3 years, 24 billion has been allocated to the infrastructure fund for blended projects. And the Infrastructure Investment Committee, we met several times. I chair the Infrastructure Investment Committee, where we consider all projects that we receive from all spheres of government and state-owned entities. So then we had a process that after we had approved the funding for blended projects, the projects still had to go to National Treasury, which is called the Budget Facility, BFI? The Budget Facility for Infrastructure. And that caused a lot of delays. And towards the end of last year, I started making noises. I took it to Cabinet. I took it to the new Minister of Finance and said, this is not on, it's delaying the implementation, and to get blended funding from the private sector. The Minister of Finance has now agreed that the infrastructure fund will be a separate budget item on its own, and that the strategic infrastructure projects, there will be no need for them to go via that BFI structure to save time and to speed up implementation. So far we have considered application for student housing infrastructure. We have for 9,500 beds. We have approved about 3 billion rand for that. Also social housing. We've received a lot of application for social housing, and so far we have approved 1.4 billion for social housing. And there are many other projects that has come before us, like the land port of entry, where the Home Affairs is going to build one-stop shop. We have also approved funding for that and for a number of water projects, like the Lepela Northern Water project. They've also a total cost of 4.5 billion. I'm just summarizing, but the detail is all in here. Now I would like to turn to the progress that we are making on the strategic infrastructure projects, some of them. A number of projects have been launched. We've moved away from announcing projects because government normally is not very good in follow through after they've made the announcement or the ribbon cutting or the sword turning. So Dr. Ramokgopa and myself has adopted a new process. We will only go to a project once the contractors are already on site. After we have concluded all the legislative requirements like the EIAs, after we are certain there's funding for that project. And so we have visited a number of projects in the past 18 months to 2 years. And I will just give you a few of those. In the next few weeks, we are going to the Eastern Cape, to Nelson Mandela Bay, for the second housing development, Sondela 2 housing project in Jefferstown. And we are going to visit with the Minister of Human Settlements, Minister Kubai, to check the progress, to see where they are on time, on budget, and how the performance is. If we pick up any blockages, where, for instance, they are waiting on a water license from the Department of Water, Dr. Ramokgopa will make that intervention. He chairs a special committee that we've put together, consisting of all Director Generals in the departments. And Doc will go there with all of those blockages and will not leave until we have resolved that. So last year we visited SIP 24C, which is the Lutheran Mixed Use Development and Soweto. We also visited SIP 21F and G, that is the N3 upgrades in KwaZulu-Natal. And while we were visiting there, because SANRAL is the implementing agency, and we were happy to see that the previous financial year, SANRAL has also got a clean audit. So we then also visited SIP 21B, that is the Messina Ring Road in Limpopo. We visited the Small Harbours Repairs and Maintenance program. There are 13 proclaimed fishing harbours in the Western Cape. And we started with the 13 in the Western Cape because they've been proclaimed. And last year we also visited Saldanha Bay and in Hermanus in December, where we then launched that project in Hermanus. So on the transport sector SIPs, there are quite a number. Now, the Department of Transport with SANRAL as the implementing agencies, as well as and delivery agent for all the national roads infrastructure, they're all in SIP 21. So SIP 21A that we visited was the Wynberg Interchange, Wynberg Station in the Free State, the N1 Polokwane Ring Road Phase 2 in Limpopo, the N1 Ventersdorp to Kroonstad in the Free State, and the N2 Mtunzini Toll Plaza to Ipangeni T Junction in KwaZulu-Natal. So those are the projects that have been gazetted and is currently in process. Then we visit a number of transport projects that is in construction at the moment. And that is 21B, F, G, and J, that include the Messina Ring Road. And this project is expected to be launched in the first quarter of 2022. The N3 Kato Ridge, the N3 Dardanelles to Linfield, also KZN, and then the N3 Eshtenburg Interchange to Murray Road in KZN. projects in transport that are currently in procurement stage. So remember, we coordinate, we monitor the implementation. So what is in procurement stage at the moment, also in SIP 21, is SIP H, I, K and L. And that includes the Paradise Valley to Marion Hilltop Plaza and KZN. They're all in KZN, the Edwin Swales, the Marion Hilltop Plaza, and the Ibikuta interchange, all in KZN. They are all in procurement stages as we speak. The small harbours, the 13 small proclaimer harbours in the Western Cape, they're 97% completed. And it will be fully completed by the end of March 2022. And then we list all the small harbours in the Western Cape. So far this project has created 894 jobs, but we've also allocated tenders worth 114 million to small SMMEs within those coastal towns. So the phase 2 of the small harbour project that we are busy with now, we identified small harbours in the Eastern Cape, Northern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, and we are currently in the project preparation stage to prepare all of those harbours so that we can start the maintenance and repairs. Then if I can quickly turn to human settlements. We're also making a lot of progress here. Now, the Social Housing Regulatory Authority that we are working very close with the Infrastructure Fund, they've been able to unlock 305 billion rand for social housing funding over the next 2 years. So the blended funding mechanism within the Infrastructure Fund, we see more and more of the private sector coming forward. In the beginning, they were not so eager, but we had to work on the trust deficit, and Doc and myself, we have many meetings with them to convince them. But I can say, as far as infrastructure is concerned, the private sector is fully on board now. Now, on human settlements, just a few highlights under SIP 24. It's the Fuchsville Extension 2 in the West Rand, 2,198 residential units, can create 953 jobs. Another SIP 24 is Hospital Street in Majuba District in KZN. Again, it consists of 53 four-story building blocks for about 1,056 units. And we expected it to create at least 3,384 jobs. Another SIP 24 is the Germiston Extension in Ukololeni, where we are looking at 201 social housing units to accommodate about 601 people. And then another SIP 24 is in Kwandukutle with a total of 492 social housing. Another one is in Hull Street 1 in Francis Bar District Municipality, a total of 600 units, 1,152 jobs. Then there's another one called the Willow Creek Project. It's located in Ermelo, in the Kgosientsho District Municipality in Mpumalanga. There the social housing units will be 360. Then the Sondela Village in Gauteng is now 100% completed. All 177 units are completed. We've got 54% occupancy rate, about 96 families have moved in already. And then the last two is the Green Creek one in Gauteng. There they're busy with 3,872 units and about 3,000 jobs. And we have always reported in the past about the Mooikloof development, which is also part of SIP 24. So in total, we've got 18 housing sub-projects that is being gazetted. And the total value of the 18 social housing projects is 129 billion, and we expect to create at least 263,000 jobs. Another sector is the water sector. The water sector is getting the most priority attention. And together with Minister Sensu Mchunu, who was quickly appointed a Director General for his department, we are now able to scale up the water projects. Now, the total value that we estimate that we need to invest in water infrastructure alone is about 115 billion rand. So, and then if we can collect and put together the 115 billion rand and we prioritize all the water projects, we can easily create 20,000 jobs during construction, and we can create 14,000 jobs during the operational phase. Just some of the water projects, SIP 19A is the Lesotho water, the Lesotho Highlands water project. It is advanced work is under construction. So the tender design for the main contracts is complete. Then the award of the main contracts is now dependent on finalizing the loan agreements, because we had to enter into some loan agreements, and this project can create about 3,500 jobs. Another big one underwater is the phase 2 of the Makolo River, and the Trans-Caledon Tunnel Authority has been able to raise a 5 billion rand standby credit facility to credit enhance the debt, raising the prospects of the transaction that we're going to enter to. This can also create about 2,000 jobs. And then the last one that we visited underwater recently, towards the end of last year, is the Berg River fuel flay augmentation scheme here in the Western Cape. So, so the final draft agreement has been circulated now to the users for consideration by the municipalities in those areas. And then, and also the irrigation boards. They are going to use the water once we extend the height of the wall. So we enter into agreements with them too. So this is now in procurement. This project is in the procurement stage, and it's got the potential to create 400 construction jobs. The last one underwater, that's also a strategic project under SIP 19, is the Unkumasi Water River project. It's now in procurement stage. And the Mzumvubu Water project, which is SIP 19F, is in phase 1 of construction. So I'll briefly turn to the energy projects in terms of the update. The risk mitigated independent power producer program SIP 20A, with an approximate investment value of 50 billion. The financial close has been extended, was extended to the end of March 2020. And local content was a key qualification for this bid window. Then the embedded generation investment program of 400 megawatts, SIP 20C. The Development Bank has now issued a request for proposals, meaning that it is going out it went out on the 31st of July 2020. Many applications were received when it closed in September 2021. And with all of these independent power producers, it is expected that the project can ensure at least 700,000 tons of emissions per annum reduction in South Africa once this project is completed. And so with bid window 5, which is now with the estimated capacity of 2,583, that was also recently announced by the Minister of DMRE, and the financial close for that is at the end of April. Then as part of the SIPs, we also have what we call special projects. And we call it special projects because it is community infrastructure. So you know that the President has in his SONA mentioned that we're going to scale up the rural bridges to 95 bridges per year. In the last financial year, we have done about 16. And so with scaling up this project, it is a good partnership between the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, the Department of Defense. They bring their technical skills, and then we get some of the funding from the provincial governments of Public Works and Transport. Public Works then also makes available a number of jobs for EPWP, but we also use the rural bridges as a training ground for young professionals. So now we're waiting for the budget. The President has announced it. I hope there will be good news tomorrow. So we can scale up the project in Mpumalanga, the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Free State, Limpopo, and Northwest. What we have done with the last launch of a bridge in KZN in the deep rural areas, Dr. Ramokgopa came up with the idea, let us take National Treasury with us so they can see the impact of the rural bridge on the communities. And there was this, I'll never forget this, there was this old man about to turn 100, and he'd never been able to cross over the bridge from the one side of the village to the other. And I can still remember him dancing and singing. So DPWI, we are now recruiting 360 qualified artisans for these programs, and then also 300 trainee artisan and engineering training that will participate in this program. Some of these trainees are already within the department. Every year we give bursaries. Just last month we hand over another 43 bursaries because we use the bursary scheme as a feeder to bring the professional skills within the department. Then another big one that I have briefed the media as we were implementing it all the time is the water savings and government buildings program and energy saving. We've gone through a long process. We got the help from National Treasury to appoint a transaction advisor that has really been driving the process for us. So as you all know, in September 2021, we went out for a request for information. Because when you go for a request for information, you want to test and see what is in the market. You want to see what you don't know that's in the market. And it closed on the 27th of October 2021. We received 58 submissions, very good submissions. And so now we are using those proposals to draw up the specification. So the request for proposals, the procurement process, starts now in the first quarter of the new financial year. Again, here we have opted for a methodology that we've never used before. And the methodology to the successful bidders will be to design the systems, to design, to build it, and to operate it, and then transfer to government. So it's that design, build, operate, and transfer. So the recent studies that we've shown, annually electricity and water consumption in government buildings is estimated to about 4,021 gigawatt hours and 39 million liters of water. So that project is also on the go. Another one that I want to give, the last one, update on the SIPs on the rural roads. The current situation is that we have got a road network of over 750,000 kilometers, the 10th longest road network internationally. And this is a combination of both paved and unpaved roads. So of the 750,000 roads, about 592,000 kilometers is unpaved. And that is where we are now focusing our target. We've estimated to pave and to upgrade these unpaved roads. We talk about 5.3 trillion rand. But, you know, we had to start somewhere, so we have started. But we have, with the Department of Transport, designed a labor-intensive program. So we're creating lots of jobs. The next part now of the labor-intensive is that we want the bricks of the paving to be manufactured locally within that district, so that we also push the district development model. So the rural roads that we will cover mostly in the rural provinces, Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, Northwest and the Free State. And so ISA is working with the National Department of Transport to upgrade the rural roads together with all the provinces. So now I briefly turn to DPWI only. There is a concern around the country that a number of DPWI buildings are standing empty, dilapidated, not used. In fact, we are spending money to secure these buildings on security costs. So we have now finally finalized our strategy how to deal with it. But we want to kill two birds with one stone. The one is that we want to reduce the number of government departments letting in from private landlords. We spend 5 billion rand a year. On our own buildings within public works, we only raise about between 60 and 80 million rand a year. So this is the new concept that we are now implementing. We call it refurbish, repurpose, operate and transfer. So we're doing a pilot now in the first quarter in Pretoria, where we have selected 5 government buildings that's currently empty. And there's such a great need for office space for government departments in Pretoria. And so how are we going to do this? The methodology that we've come up with is, like I said, refurbish, operate and transfer. And we start the pilot with the 5 buildings that we've identified to do like a proof of concept. Because while we are doing the proof of concept and the pilot with the 5 buildings, we are busy packaging another 200 buildings that we want to put out in the second quarter of the next financial year, following the same methodology. So it will not cost government any money. The private sector will invest in repairing and refurbishing and repurposing the building. We guarantee them that we will bring government departments into government-owned buildings. So in return, what they are looking for is a long-term lease between 15 to 20 years, because they will refurbish, and then they will operate, and then they will transfer after 20 years, 15 years to government. But we're also including in the contracts with the private sector that they will be responsible for the maintenance and for the facility management building of that building for as long as they operate it. Because that is the weakness in the current system. Some of these leases are signed without making provision for repairs and maintenance. So this is a new strategy. I'm very hopeful with this, and there's quite a lot of interest from the private sector already. I think it will go a long way in getting, in reducing the cost that government pay in private sector landlord buildings to save money for government. I'll come back on the other SONA issues. I'm going to ask Dr. Ramokgopa just to brief you on the funding mechanism. We have come up with very innovative funding mechanism, and we are piloting some of them, but we will no longer have the excuse that we don't have money. It is just that, or sometimes also we don't have the money. There you find a lot of underspending on infrastructure on all three spheres of government, including state-owned entities. So Dr. Ramokgopa will take you some of the solutions in the funding space. Doc, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, and good day to everyone. Just to indicate that Minister de Lille did present to Cabinet, if you like, the investment dilemma that is facing the country. So the situation at the moment is that the fiscal matrix is deteriorating, the fiscal headspace is diminishing. If you like, the fiscal runway is almost non-existent. But also on the other hand, there's an expectation, if you read the National Development Plan, that the state needs to be a catalyst for investment in the country. The expectation is that for us to be able to achieve the aspirational targets of the NDP, there has to be levels of investment in the economy must constitute 30% of gross fixed capital formation. And as I'm talking to you now, that number is sitting at about 4.9%. So in rand value terms, it means that we have to invest an additional 598 billion rand per annum for us to be able to achieve that target. So the current investment in infrastructure per annum is sitting at 213 billion rand on average. So we need an additional 598 billion rands per annum, and clearly the state will not be able to afford that. So Minister de Lille then presented to Cabinet to say that we need to explore alternative financing mechanisms, and that was the reason why we're able to birth what we call the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium, shortly referred to as the SEEDS. So what the SEEDS does is essentially a meeting place of good quality bankable projects with potential financiers. So the intention is to relieve the fiscus of the burden to finance good quality projects, but to package them in a manner that can lend themselves to be financed through the debt capital market. Minister de Lille has made reference to some of these projects, but at an aggregate level. When we inaugurated the SEEDS in 2020, we presented before the market about 50 quality projects in our opinion, to the tune of 340 billion rands. And as I speak to you, 29 of these projects are either in completion stage, they are either in construction or have been completed, and in total they amount to 119 billion rands. Minister de Lille has already enumerated on some of those in the student housing program, social housing program, the water program, and also the energy program. So we then went into the second iteration of the SEEDS, which took place last year, we presented to the markets about 55 projects for possible consideration. The total investment of those projects, or the value of these projects, were 595 billion rands. 40% of these projects were at what we call early preparation stage. In layman's term, it means that they either at conceptual level stage or either at pre-feasibility. So the project sponsors were not able to demonstrate to the market that there's sustainable revenue stream to support any possible private sector participation. As Minister de Lille has indicated, we have made a case for the state to invest upstream of these projects so that we have a significant amount of resources directed at project preparation in the form of money, so that we are able to recruit technical experts in the field of financial engineering skill and also technical engineering skills. So we'll continue to give you an update, because this is a project that we presented just recently at the Sustainable Development Symposium. And then Minister de Lille made mention of the fact that the President had introduced or announced the creation of what they call the infrastructure fund. It's a blended financing mechanism. So what that simply means is that we're looking for a solution that is a combination of both debt and grant. And the state will put seed funding of about 100 billion rand stretched over a period of time of 10 years, with the initial injection of about 4.1 billion and then an additional 17 billion going forward in the current financial year. So what have we achieved out of that? So we have been able to blend projects to the tune of 21 billion rands, and we have used 2.6 billion rands for us to be able to blend those projects. So the Minister has spoken to those including the social housing program, the student housing infrastructure program, and also the on the water resources side, and Olifants from Sport and Ebenezer Dam, and also the Mokolo Crocodile. And what is sitting in the pipeline of those projects that will come on market is the one-stop border post, targeting the 6 land border posts in the country, and that is to the tune of 11 billion rands. So we are going out to the debt capital markets now in May for us to be able to get the private sector participation. Remember that we are blending those projects. Essentially, we are de-risking the project, and the state is prepared to take the first loss. So that's another mechanism of how we are getting projects to market. And then there's what the Minister referred to as private sector-led projects. There's about 7 brownfields developments in the country. When I say brownfields, it means that the contractors are already on site, but they can't progress to the next phases of these programs because of the constraint of bulk. And these projects are to the tune of 134 billion rands. That can be unlocked, so you don't have to go through a procurement process, doesn't trigger a procurement event, because these are private sector sponsored projects. So the only thing that is needed is for the state to inject money to support bulk, the expansion of the capacity of the infrastructure to support the future use as a result of these projects. So as you have noted, the President spoke about this. So we're introducing the catalytic bulk infrastructure fund. The seed capital is 1.8 billion rands, and all of these 133 billion rands projects are then able to progress. And of course, Minister Godongwana will then provide those details tomorrow. And then there are social programs. So the Minister speaks about the Rural Bridges Program. We are scaling it up from 14 bridges per annum to 95 bridges per annum. We are accelerating the delivery of school infrastructure. Just to give you a sense of the scale of the problem, there's 3,225 schools that require improvement on their infrastructure. It could be that learners are learning under conditions of mud schools, they are in prefabricated classrooms, or they don't have good quality, if you like, quality sanitation. At the current fiscal allocation to remedy that situation, it's going to take us 68 years to extinguish the backlogs. So essentially we needed to recreate and re-engineer the financing dispensation. So what we have done, as announced in SONA, is to create an SPV. So what does that mean? So we go to private sector, we get the commitments to finance these programs now. It is to the tune of 193 billion rands, far advanced in our discussions with the pension funds who are looking to make ESG related investments. ESG is environment, social and governance investment. So the issue is about impact and less about the returns. So we get that money now, and then we place from the fiscal allocations going into the future. They are going to be ring-fenced in favor of the pension funds, because they would have made their money available now to allow us to extinguish that. So that's an innovation that we have introduced, and of course we'll give you those details going forward. And then just in conclusion, in relation to the delivery, remember we are trying to address a multiplicity of issues that are afflicting the infrastructure delivery in the public sector. So the first one is the financing. So I shared with you about the seeds, the fact that we package projects, invest upstream, so that projects that are good quality, have got a reliable and sustainable revenue streams, don't have to compete with social projects. We get to present them to the seeds, and I've told you the kind of progress that we've made. Then the second category is the ones that don't have sufficient revenue to justify participation of the private sector. Those gets to be funded through the infrastructure fund. And then there are those projects that don't have any revenue streams, like building a school. I just told you that we are introducing an innovative social infrastructure fund, attracting in the main pension funds to provide seed capital so that we are able to accelerate. So that's the financing. The next problem that is facing the state. So even if you have to have money today, state capacity has been hemorrhaged over a period of time. So the technical and financial engineering capacity of the state has been compromised. So Minister de Lille has instructed that we must improve in the shortest possible space of time the capacity of the state to deliver on this project, because ultimately, as the accounting authority, she is the one that has to go to account to Parliament and the public in relation to an accelerated effort. So as a start, we'll be recruiting about 86 professionals in the built environment, a combination of people with extensive experience and people who are youngsters coming into that. They'll shadow those who've got extensive experience to deliver on this social infrastructure. Of course, it will not be sufficient. You need an exponential number of people in the built environment. But as a start, in the next 4 months, we are going to be very aggressive, redirecting 150 million rands of the resources for us to be able to accelerate that. What is the benefit? The first thing is that we are hopeful that we are going to reduce the professional fees that are associated with rolling out this infrastructure. We are going to standardize the design of what we call a frequently constructed public assets. So a police station, a hospital, a school, the design will be the same. So essentially we are bringing down the professional fees. And then the third thing that we hope to achieve out of this is an accelerated procurement program. So that part of the problem that we're sitting with is that on average there's underspending in the infrastructure ecosystem in the public sector of about 43 billion rands per annum. So if you look at that story, you can see your issue is not funding and in the shortest possible space of time. It's the quality of delivery, the efficiency of spending, and you must undermine leakage. So we hope to address that situation. And then the third one is the agility of us to be able to ensure that in the design of this infrastructure project, they are mass orientated. So there are as many people as possible that can be employed in this program. And then the fourth one is about the efficiency, reducing greenhouse gas emissions associated with the rolling out of this program. So we're addressing the financing, we're addressing the procurement, the speed of delivery, the quality of delivery, the efficiency of delivery. We're addressing cost effectiveness so that we're able to stretch the rent. I mean, it's not uncommon in the country for the same unit school, a school with the same number of classrooms. In one province, that school costs about 120 million rands. In another province, it costs about 60 million rands. So there's an anomaly there. So we're beginning to standardize that. As the President has mentioned, of course, Minister de Lille has led this, is that the pilot sites is both the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape, and the intention is to roll out to other provinces. And in conclusion, we're targeting to roll out 85 kilometers of rural roads. This is in addition to what provinces are doing. So when I mention 685 kilometers, it's not the only kilometers of roads that are going to be paved, but these ones will be paved through this program to ensure that there's employment creation. We're going to use brick paving so that we were able to intensify, or if you like, massify employment opportunities in those areas. And in this way, we hope to resolve both the financing and the delivery of infrastructure in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Let me just finish off the other SONA issues. The one SONA issue that the President mentioned was the 14,000 hectares of land that the Department of Public Works is busy with at the moment. Now, and I can report as follows. 40,000 hectares of land was identified late in 2019 and was approved by Cabinet for release. And 63 parcels of the 14,000 land is being used by the Department of Defense. So it included 4 military bases and 1 land parcel in the Western Cape that is being used currently by the Western Cape SAPs. And so the size of the military bases amounts to about 542 hectares out of the 14,000 hectares. Then, thereafter, we ran into obstacles. In the interministerial committee chaired by the Deputy President, comments were made by the Department of Defense that some of these land parcels are not available for to be allocated to human settlements. That was on the 26th of February 2021. We then decided, let us go and see for ourselves, and the Interministerial Committee mandated myself, Minister Dedisa, and the then Minister of Defense, Mapisa. We did a visit on the 27th of February to all the military bases in the Western Cape. We started off with Eysterplaat. Eysterplaat, for instance, has got a runway, and there's a small piece of land between Eysterplaat and the highway. Now, if you attempt to build anything there, you will have to build specially constructed houses because of the decibel limits of the noise of the planes that come and land there. And also, Eysterplaat was in the process of upgrading their not customs, where people come through when they depart and they land. So from Eysterplaat, we then proceeded to Youngsfield. when we arrive at Youngsfield, there are some pockets of land, like in the center of Youngsfield, but the rest of Youngsfield is surrounded by a number of stores, storing from bullets to guns to whatever they store there as the military. So it was like a storage facility. And the military also told us you can't have civilians living so close by our bases. From there we proceeded to Wingfield. Wingfield, towards the end of Wingfield, facing more the main road, Voortrekker Road, there is a piece of land that belonged to Public Works, about 36 hectares. And we agreed that that land must be released for human settlements. So out of the 542 hectares, we've been able to agree on the release of 36 hectares at Wingfield. The rest of the process that followed was that we now had to go back to Cabinet and bring to the attention of Cabinet the obstacles in releasing all the military land. And the Minister of Defence, the then Minister of Defence, was tasked to prepare the Cabinet memorandum. So Public Works made an input in June of 2021, and this CAB memo has not yet reached Cabinet. So the majority of the parcels of the military land remain unresolved, except the 36 hectares that Public Works is making available for human settlements. So that is work in progress, but the other land parcels that we have released for human settlements, apart from the 14,000 hectares of land, as part of that, 13 land parcels that is not part of the fence land, measuring about 531 hectares. We've approved that by Public Works and Infrastructure. We have signed a special of attorney to the housing development agencies to start development. So therefore, between May 2019 and February 2022, DPWI has released 40 land parcels measuring 2,620 hectares for human settlements, and all of these parcels of land have been spatially mapped, and the Housing Development Agency supporting by Priority Housing Development, they are now busy with the process of building there. We have also approved as DPWI, we were approached by the Minister of Transport that they had to relocate people that were living on the main line between Cape Town, Khayelitsha and Mitchells Plain. And so we have released to the Department of Transport to assist them to relocate people. I signed it, the power of attorney will be signed off by the end of this month. And so we have allocated 17.7 hectares to PRASA and the Department of Transport to relocate people from there. I currently have on my desk 21 land parcels measuring about 440 hectares, and all of them will be processed before the end of the financial year. Then, in terms of agricultural land, we have released 125 properties measuring about 25,500 hectares. But the way it works is agricultural land, so we have to transfer the land to Minister Dedisa for her then to make sure it become part of the redistribution of agricultural land. So we've transferred that to her department. And also since May 2019, we've released 204 properties, pieces of land totaling over 28,000 hectares for restitution purposes. There are still a number of restitution claims that are outstanding. And again, the process is that I transferred to Minister de Lille. Minister de Lille, in terms of the Land Restitution Act, must then follow the due process like verification of the family tree and all of that. Also in terms of land tenure, where we find productive land that is still in the possession of public works, the first one we did was that we gave land tenure to 30 farmers in Limpopo. So they've got the title to their land now. And that just opened up a whole market for them, collateral. They can buy they can enter into loans and all of that. So that is in terms of the SONA land issue that the President mentioned. Just before I get to the Parliament fire, DPWI, we've also released to assist with the fight against GBVF. We've released 12 shelters, 6 in the Western Cape and 6 in Gauteng. Because sometimes a woman is in that position, she sometimes stays there because she has nowhere to go. We have now identified another 14 safe houses with the Department of Social Development in the Northern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal and Mpumalanga that we're going to hand over to be refurbished for GBV shelters. Let me turn to the parliamentary fire. It's the first time that I'm giving a report, so I have tried to give you as much detail from the report that I received yesterday. Because last week we made an announcement that we don't want to be said that Public Works is investigating ourselves. We have to appoint an independent service provider to do, with specialists to do the investigation. So on the 11th of February, we appointed Kgosientsho Development Corporation to provide that service. So following the engineering services of Public Works, where they did a visual assessment of the building and did identify some structural damage to the building. The scope of work for Kgosientsho that we in terms of reference is that they must make an assessment of the fire damaged buildings in the parliamentary precinct to pronounce on the extent of the damage. They must also provide professional advice on the safety of the structures, and they must provide measures to temporarily make the structures safe to allow the investigations to proceed. So their first deliverable was that within a week they must do an initial assessment, which they've done now, and upon completion of the assessment, the service provider they then have to tell us for their preliminary assessment, the cost, the extent of the damage, how long will it take. So we're now entering into the phase 2 where they're going to do that work. This is the report that we've received yesterday. So Kgosientsho has completed the bulk of the preliminary assessment and reported the fire damage to the National Assembly building, the old assembly buildings, following the fires of the 2nd and 3rd of January. The basement floors of the new assembly building are flooded, and more inspection works need to be done in this area. That's in the new assembly. The assessment also confirmed that the fire in the National Assembly building caused significant damage to a central structural element from the 2nd floor up to the 6th floor. But the structural integrity is such that the structure at this stage is not vulnerable to collapse. So Kgosientso's final structural assessment report, they will then design their final assessment report into 3 zones for the new assembly. They will use a red, amber and green zones, and these colors will designate within the buildings and their status with respect to SAPs, to access the building for investigations. So green zones will represent areas that are fairly lightly damaged structurally and which may be accessed almost immediately by SAPs to continue the investigations. The amber zones are badly damaged zones which may be accessed almost immediately by properly inducted SAPS teams. So before they can access that building, they can only do so accompanied by the specialist team from Kgosientso. And then the red zone is the severely damaged no-go zones, which may not be accessed by the SAPS team. So it's the SAPS and the WARCS. So WARCS has taken over the investigation. Should the investigation trail render access to specific areas within the no-go zones to be very desirable, then the structural engineers will advise on special temporary access structures to be constructed where possible to allow the investigators access with due regard to safety and without applying loads on the severely compromised part of the structure. They further recommend certain short to intermediate term safety measures to be put in place to safeguard the personnel and certain remaining portions of the structures. And these measures are recommended to be put in place after the conclusion of the SAPS investigation. The Kgosientso team is on track to commence with the 2nd phase, comprising of the detailed assessment to determine the extent of the damage for full restoration of the building, including providing a cost and time estimate for such work. And the latter will commence after the forensic investigations and should take 3 to 4 weeks to conclude. Remember that it is a crime scene. It was handed over by the WARCS, so the professionals, specialists have to also. And then there is just what will be included in the 2nd phase. I'm not going to go through that of the detailed assessment. It's all in the statement. And then just lastly, a lot is being said about debt owed to DPWI and DPWI amounts that we owe to municipalities. This is also a long story. Now, we've seen over the past few weeks what happened in the city of Tshwane. And according to DPWI's latest age analysis that we received from the city of Tshwane, a total amount of 82 million was reported to be outstanding, with 77 million current and within 30 days, and 53 million more than 60 days. So we have now processed payments to the value of 464 million to the city for all the invoices that we have received. And this demonstrates that we are ready and willing and able to pay, and we remain committed to pay. The disconnection of services experienced by government client departments were as a result of private landlords that are not paying the municipality for the services, rates and taxes due. The issue of the private landlords not paying for municipal service in buildings leased for government departments, it affected the Tshwane only 2 landlords. The one landlord was able to offset, to settle the account, and the second landlord made some payments. And over and above what we've paid to the city, we've also paid 1.5 billion and 2.3 billion in property rates and municipal services for the current 2021-22 financial year. Lastly, in relation to Eskom, as of the 31st of January, the department received an age analysis with a total amount of 13.6 million and 10.4 million for large and small power users respectively. The department has paid Eskom 470 million rand since April 2021. So all our accounts are in good state, but here's our problem as a department. We pay on behalf of government departments, and they supposed to reimburse us. Now, as of 31st of January 2022, the total debt owed to DPWI is 9.25 billion. We must really improve the culture of payment right from the top down to the ordinary person in the street. So the top 15 clients owe us 98% of this 9 billion rand. And then we've got about 4 billion rand that's in dispute, but we are working through the dispute. So we've tried to meet with the clients directly. I've written letters to the minister. The DG met with other DGs and other departments, so we are really trying very hard to recover this money. So it's not only Eskom that's owed money, we also owe 9.2 billion. That's all for now. I know it was long, but I know you sometimes expect the President to give all of this detail in the SONA. That is why we as ministers are there to give you the actual detail. So thank you for your attention, and we will now take some questions, please. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention. As the Minister said, it was long, but it literally was detail on the issues that members of the media have been asking about. And so there you have it. It takes some reading, but it gives you the details on infrastructure, on the financing aspect of the infrastructure investment plan. Everyone wants to know the latest on the fire, so there you have it, as well as the payments to municipalities, especially the City of Tshwane's campaign. So there you have the latest figures, and the statement should be in some of your inboxes already, so thank you for your patience with that. We'll take some questions. We'll start with those journalists here in person in Cape Town. I'll start with you and then Paul. Monique, are you fine? Okay. So we've got 2 here in Cape Town so far, I think. If you could just start with introducing yourself and your media house, and then you can ask your question. Thank you.
Hello, this is Lamise Omaruji from News 24. My question just relates to the blended infrastructure projects no longer having to go through Treasury's budget facility. Can you just provide more clarity on that and the significance of it? What is the significance of Treasury then listing infrastructure as a separate budget item? Does it make the private sector see these projects differently, like de-risk, that sort of thing? And then my other question is just, of the 55 bankable projects, which ones are moving forward? Or are those the ones you referred to, such as student housing? Yeah, just clarity on that.
Good afternoon, Minister. Paul Bettiati from Bloomberg. I just want to get the infrastructure fund. So there's going to be a separate line item in budgets tomorrow, I presume. And are you expecting how much in that I'm not sure if I've got, it's 100 billion over a number of years, or what are you expecting in that? So I think it ties in with Lemise's question with National Treasury on it as well. And then you mentioned 55 bankable projects. That's out of how many in total? Or projects that you looked at? Over what period of time? Thank you.
Okay, Minister and Dr. Ramokgopa.
You can take the one, but
Could we just answer those two, and then we'll go to the WhatsApp line after that?
Thank you very much, Lami. So what is currently happening is that the infrastructure fund receive submissions for possible blended financing. Then we take those applications through a governance framework, culminating in a body that is chaired by Minister de Lille. And that body also brings on board private sector players so that they provide a perspective through the private sector lens. And it also draws on Director General's, key Director General's Human Settlements, National Treasury, DMRE, because those are, if you like, the departments that are likely to receive applications. And then that committee then approves and say, we are happy with these projects, they are sound, the underlying revenue streams, we think that they can sustain the projects. Of course, all they need is blended financing. So once they get to be approved in terms of the current dispensation, then we must wait for August for the budget facility for infrastructure to consider this project. And then we get to submit them through that process. That process subjects this project to the same level of scrutiny that they have already been subjected to by the professionals at the Infrastructure Fund, at ISA, and ultimately the minister. So we are duplicating. And then, if successful, then they get to be allocated, and then that's what the minister got to announce. But we think that we can improve that process, that when a budget is presented, then there has to be a dedicated vote for the infrastructure fund. You are not abolishing the budget facility for infrastructure. Social project can still go there. But remember, this is specially designed, bespoke, for purposes of blended financing. And that's the route we want to follow. So you don't have to wait for August. You can consider projects as and when they are available. So in theory, you can meet bi-monthly, which is what the minister is advocating for. And in that way, you are able to accelerate the pipeline. So that's what we are. Of course, what the minister said is that it's at the level of principle, the Minister of Finance has agreed. So that assignment has then been given to the official just for a technical articulation of what that appropriation will mean. That it will be presented tomorrow. It's a matter that Minister Godongwana and the team will consider. But it's something that must be introduced immediately. And in that way, what Minister de Lille has mentioned is going to become possible. And I guess Paul also in response to that. So the initial allocation for the fund is 100 billion rand, stretched over a period of 10 years. Yes. And it doesn't follow that it's on average 10 billion rand per annum. So for the MTEF period, I think it was about 17 billion rand or so, starting with 4.1 billion the previous financial year, and then at this current financial year. But again, we're sitting with that problem. Although on paper you say 100 billion, but it must still be subjected to a BFI process. Right. And our view is that create a special dispensation so that there's a budget vote dedicated to the infrastructure fund, and in this way you are going to realize the benefits. So you must still subject yourself to the BFI. Happens only once a year, somewhere in August. You are repeating the exercise that we have done. So it's part of the lessons we have learned, and then we are making that efficient.
Will that be within your department's budget?
No. So, part of so there are multiple iterations that are possible, and that's why Minister de Lille and Godongwana gave to the team. The first one can be an appropriation, but it's sitting with National Treasury. Right. So as and when Minister de Lille's committee approves, we go to that appropriation and say these projects are ready, and then they allocate. The second one was that you send it to, it's an allocation to DBSA, but it's ring fenced for that purpose. So essentially we're looking with the legal team on what are the legal ramifications of one option over the other, but the principle is there. That it will be ready for the next financial year is a different story. So what we have agreed is that if that dispensation is not available for the next financial year, what we'll do as an interim measure is that the BFI doesn't have to wait for August. We can meet as and when the projects are ready. And in that way, but the more healthier option is to have something dedicated and you move. So it will be the regularity of the BFI until that dispensation is approved by Minister de Lille and Godongwan. It's in place, and then the infrastructure fund, if you like, in its most clinical and technical sense, it then exists because it's ring fenced. But now it's sitting with all other allocations, Paul. And then the last question, Paul, is the 55 is out of 130 projects. So what we have done, the quality of the remainder of the projects were such that we couldn't present them to the potential, to the debt capital market.
Yeah.
We still need to invest in project preparation, and that's why Minister de Lille is advocating in Cabinet that resources must be dedicated towards project prep. I mean, 400 million rand, in rand value, absolute terms is a lot, but in the context of the pipeline is insignificant. So that's what Minister de Lille is advocating for. And in fact, just last week she had assigned us to meet with the AFDB on the sidelines of the Africa-EU summit, just to look for funding that can help us in project preparation, as we do with the other MDBs. And there's a great deal of appetite, so we're framing that for the approval of the minister, and once we do that, we can then tap into those funds. Of course, they'll have conditions that they want to fund in the future. Yeah, so those are the things. There has to be a Chinese hall. You fund the project prep, and then once it's ready, it must go through a competitive process. But of course, they'll say, but we have invested, we took the risk, so we have to take it to Minister de Lille. Subsequently, she will take it to Cabinet and see how we resolve that tension, so that people are, we are not seen not to be going through a competitive process. Thanks.
Yeah. It's a sharp learning process.
Yes.
Very sharp. But what the lesson that we've learned is that if you want blended funding, the private sector is not going to sit there and wait for the budget facility to meet once a year. They take their money somewhere else. So it's really also part of reducing the red tape and the bureaucracy in government. Because if we can get investment money, which we need so desperately, we need to make sure that we make sure that we act as quickly as possible, still within the framework of the law. So the impact of this will really help us to implement faster and to get blended funding faster. Because remember, we have got the private sector that serve with us on the Infrastructure Investment Committee. And they sometimes just look at us, is this what government is all about? So thank you for that.
Thank you, Minister and Dr. Ramokgopa. We've got a question on the online platform from Cliff Shiko from Jacaranda FM. His question is, does the Mkolo Dam project in Limpopo, is it led by government or the private sector? So is it a government or private sector led project? If it's private sector led, how does government come to the party? And then the second question is, any student accommodation owned by the department or government to mitigate the students' accommodation shortage? Cliff, there is content on that in the statement under the infrastructure fund, where for 4 student housing projects for the delivery of 9,500 beds, a BFI amount of 900 million rand from the infrastructure fund was approved for student housing over 2 financial years. So that is in the statement on page 3 just to answer that question, but we can just then answer the question on whether Makolo Dam, the project in Limpopo, is government or private sector led.
Well, maybe just to say that the Mkolo Crocodile water augmentation project is one of those projects that have come through the infrastructure fund. Let me just explain the design of the infrastructure fund to help to explain the question. So what the fund does, it says on behalf of the public, the state is prepared to take the risk because we understand the strategic value of this project and want the project to happen. Remember, it's going to provide, once it's done, it's an augmentation program, so it means that the amount of water in those spaces is not sufficient for consumption to meet the demand for potable water. So the state is coming in and there's a funding gap. So the project is presented, has got revenue stream. So you can see that people are going to pay through tariffs, but remember there's a social component to this. A poor household, there's I think it's 6 kiloliters of water per month that is provided for free. So you are never going to get any money coming out of that. So as a result of the social component of the program, it doesn't become commercially viable. So there's what we call in technical financing terms, what they call a funding gap. So the state says, I'm prepared to take the risk on behalf of the poor. I'm going to close the funding gap so that the commercial components of the program can be financed to the private sector. So that's what the blended finance means. It's a combination of grant and debt. The grant is covered by the public because that's the money coming out of the fiscus, although it comes through an instrument called the infrastructure fund, and then the private sector then invests the remainder. So it's a combination of public and private. So that's how Mkolo Crocodile works. And anything that the minister is listed as infrastructure fund, it follows that matrix. The state takes the risk on behalf of the citizens, in the main the poor, and then the commercial aspects are carried by the private sector, so that together we can blend, as the name says, to deliver the project. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ramokgopa. I don't see any more questions on the Zoom chat, but there's just 3 ones, Minister. It is 2 o'clock, so we're going to wrap up after the Minister answers these 3. I'm not sure where this person is from. It is a member of the media. You just haven't given Saba Zah. The questions are, what are the plans for social housing in most of the controversially unjust prime land of the Western Cape? So social housing on prime land in the Western Cape. And then what is the private sector gain by refurbishing buildings with regard to controlling those spaces? Who's making sure that the private sector doesn't privatize plans for equitable social housing? So those are the last ones, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah, maybe we start with the last one. The proof of concept that we are doing, the intention is that the buildings will remain the property of the state, but we will lease the buildings on the long term to the private sector. They will refurbish, repurpose, and they will operate those buildings by deriving an income from guaranteed government departments that will be inside that building. And they will operate the building for 15 to 20 years, depending on the lease. But we give them an extra responsibility. It's a government-owned asset, but we make them responsible for maintenance. Facility management will be part of the contract. So they will be able to run away with our properties because it's going to be on a lease basis, a long-term lease basis. The social housing prime land in the Western Cape, it is just, I think, a resistance to integrating the city. I know that there are 12, 15 pieces of land that were released. in 2017 already. It's subsequently been withdrawn. Within the city centre, within 5 kilometres radius from the city centre. I don't have to answer for that anymore, but you know, they create a perception that the reason why they are not able to build social housing or to integrate the city to bring people closer to opportunities is because government, national government, is refusing to release land. And to detract the attention away from the land owned by the city, focus on the military land. Okay, so now I'm able to tell them, we're going to give you 36,000 hectares of land in Wingfield while we sort out the other army bases. Where's your own land? I mean, and people need to begin to ask for access to their immovable asset register. You can go down to the deeds office there and you can go and check and see which land belongs to the city. We work with all 3 spheres of government, with provincial government, with national government. If there's a need for land, like in the case of Prasa, where they need to operate the railway line, if we have land, we will transfer it to government departments, gratis. We don't charge for any land transaction between the different spheres of government. So I think that question is best answered. I've just seen that some very prime land will be auctioned to the private sector sometime in the next month or so, which is very unfortunate because we need to find that balance of bringing people closer to work opportunities and also at the same time provide affordable housing. We, just from the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, we work with all the cities around the country. Dr. Ramokgopa is busy engaging with the city of Cape Town on the possible repurposing of Customs House and other pieces of land that we have identified. So we are not resistant to work with any sphere of government when it comes to the sharing of land, because land is a scarce resource, it's something that you can't grow. Thank you.
That's it. I think everyone's happy. Thank you, Minister and Dr. Ramokgopa.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for everyone's attention and for attending
Sure,
today.
we're all hungry.
Bye. Very good. Minister Afrikaans, someone needs to PMCA.